We want to start us off, Joseph?
Yes, let's get to the show.
Let's do it. All right, guys. So welcome everybody to the Multifamily Investor Network, New York, with Nico and Joseph. This is not an in-person meetup. We do both, though. We do Zoom meetups and in-person meetups. And tonight we got a really cool guest. Her name is Billye Sanford. Billye, I'm going to have you kind of talk a little bit about your background while we're recording because I was looking at your bio and it's long. I will read the whole thing and I like it, but perhaps you might be able to shorten or condense it a little bit.
Sure. Um, well, basically, I fell in love with construction as a toddler, following my father around when he built our family home. And later on, I started working in construction and in construction procurement. And I hired architects, engineers, and contractors. So I guess I'll go ahead and share my screen. And
Go ahead, you're given the permission.
yeah. So okay, can you see my screen?
Yeah, looks good.
I love the name, Blueprint for hiring the best contractor.
So we'll talk about why projects fail, creating scope of work, hiring the right contractor, and women hiring construction contractors. And so I was hiring contractors for institutional projects. And these are some of the projects that I worked on. A law school, a medical school, a science and technology building, academic building, and a performing arts building. And the largest one was the medical school, was $250 million project. And I ran a department of 7 people who hired for 5 universities throughout Maryland. So, but this little building right here was my toughest contract to hire. It was harder to hire for that building than it was for all of the larger buildings. Before we go further, I'll introduce you to my family. These are my grandkids, Augie and Artie, my 2 daughters, Alicia and Althea, and my son-in-law. So every now and then, I go out on social media and I ask, what is the biggest frustration related to fix and flips and renovation? And the number one answer that I receive is usually dealing with contractors. I think about 60% of the time I get that answer. Sometimes I get acquisition about 10% of the time. And then sometimes I get capital gains about 60% of the time. So I think it's probably the newest people who are saying acquisition and the most seasoned people who are saying capital gains. And the people right there in the middle are saying dealing with contractors. Oops, sorry. So the question gets to be, why do so many people have a hard time dealing with contractors? And that's because we choose unreliable contractors for a number of reasons. Oh, and let me tell everyone, excuse me because I have something on my mouth, which is a cough drop because I have a bit of a cold. So I'm gonna do my best to get through without coughing too much. But sometimes we assume that contractors know what they're doing without vetting them. We may have gotten a recommendation and we feel like we don't have to vet them. We underestimate the importance of staying in control of our project throughout the renovation process. And sometimes we just need to gain the knowledge on how to hire a contractor.
Controllers.
And the biggest reason I think sometimes is that people don't want to spend the time, the money, the effort that it takes to hire a contractor. So there are good contractors out there, and you can recognize a good contractor because they want to build positive relationships with you, and they're open in their communication, and they make sure that they keep you well informed. So the right contractor is going to give you quality work. It's going to keep you on schedule. It's going to be cost effective. And they're going to have all their insurance and legal protections in place. And with that, you'll have peace of mind. So the most important reason is to hire right is that you get a significant increase in your return on investment. So I'm going to show you on a project that had bad contractors. So this is an actual project, and the amount of rework that had to be done was over $30,000. The additional carrying costs were close to $35,000, which is a total of about $65,000. So if the investor had hired, well, this gives you a breakdown of those costs, and you can see that most of those costs were in interest-only payments to the hard money lender, but there was also work that had to be redone in all the trades, which amounted to, failed inspections. So how do we avoid unreliable contractors? We put in the work upfront planning. The more you plan, the better chance you have of having reliable contractors and having a successful project. So on the project I was talking about previously, I think a couple of my slides are out of order, but if the investor had spent money on the soft costs, on the upfront planning, it would have been about $4,500, or even if it were $10,000, you can see that on that project, the investor would have gained a much better return on their investment. So the goal when you're hiring a contractor is building a long-term relationship, a sustainable relationship, so that both of you benefit over time. So anyone feel free to jump in and ask a question whenever you would like. So there are basically 9 steps to hiring a contractor, 9 or so. But I'm going to take you through these 9 steps, but I'm really going to start with step number 6 that says prepare the bid documents. And the reason for that is that everything kind of revolves around you're having a good scope of work. And how you do that is first you create a master plan. You do basically what we tend to call due diligence, and you review your list of comparable properties. You decide on your exit strategy. You decide what you must have and can't live without in your renovation. And then you make list of what you can't have and live without, what's nice to have, and you get an inspection report. So then you clarify your role, and you assemble a design team so that you can put together your design. Your design team can be made up of architect, draftsman, or designer. It just depends on how extensive your renovation is. So, and this applies whether you're doing 1 unit, a single family home, or whether you're doing 40 units. The steps are the same. And often on small projects, we overlook the steps, which gets us into trouble. So the scope of work is the heart of the matter. And you'll see that we keep coming back to the scope of work. So first you set the guidelines and you gather the home inspection report that you got earlier and the market information, and you use all of these things to put together realistic project expectations. And then you do a walkthrough, physically walk through the property. If you have drawings, you do a takeoff. You identify any challenges and opportunities that you may have. And while you're walking through, you try to shoot a video so that you can give that to your contractor also, along with your scope of work that you put together so that you can get accurate bids.
Billye, what's a takeoff? You said you could do a takeoff when you're looking at the architectural design?
Yes, a takeoff is what they call it when you, on your drawings, you count everything on your drawings. Like you count the number of windows, you count the number of electrical outlets, you count anything on the drawings, you know.
Oh,
How
makes sense.
wood, how much drywall you need, you do it from the drawings, and it's called a takeoff.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Sure.
And,
More
and Billye,
questions,
quick
please.
question.
Sure.
You're doing this as a role of project manager. Is that right?
Yes. Well, you can do this as you can have a project manager do it for you. You can do it yourself. If you're new and you've never done it before, it's better to have someone do it for you. A lot of people want to have the contractor do it for them, but that's not a good idea. And the reason is that the contractor, even though he works for you, he works for himself. So you need someone who works for you to be in this role. So it can be a project manager, it can be architect, it could be anyone who knows how to do it. And eventually, after you've done it 2 or 3 times, you could do it yourself. It's just a matter of learning how to do it. So
EV had a question. Do you want to address that in the end, or you want to address it as you go?
we can address them as we go.
Okay, Evie, why don't you actually unmute yourself and you can address your question yourself?
Hey guys, thanks. I was just curious to know from your experience, would you hire out of state contractors to do work on that specific property? And if yes, then what are the advantage or disadvantage of doing so?
Well, personally, probably not. So a contractor has to be licensed to do work in that state, or it just depends on the state's rules and regulations. That there's sometimes reciprocal agreements, or what they call a resident agent. They have to have a resident agent. So you would have to look into the rules of your state, the laws of your state, to see if you could actually have an out-of-state contractor work on the property. And then it's better to have a contractor who's familiar with the local jurisdiction, because they're familiar with the codes of the local jurisdiction. Does that help you?
Yeah, thank you.
So while you're going through the property, you need to document the mechanics, and by that I mean take pictures of the HVAC, how old it is, you know, and the water heater, all the electrical boxes and everything, so that you'll know what needs to be done with those. You do a window and door count. You do a light and electrical count. And this is a sample demo scope of work. So basically the demo is to remove and dispose of any furnishings and debris left by a previous owner, remove existing basement expansion tank, remove a vanity and second floor. But one important thing about demo scopes is that you also need to tell the contractor what to leave. But this is just to give you a basic idea of a scope of work. You're telling them exactly what needs to be done. You also need to do a materials breakdown to make a list of any materials and equipment and the specifications that you need for your project. And your next step is to prepare your budget and estimate. So there are different types of estimates. There's a rough order of magnitude, there's a square footage, and there's a line item. And in rough order of magnitude is just kind of based on your experience. And square footage is dividing, it's also based on your experience, but you're dividing the total cost of a project by the square footage of the project. And line item, you're writing out each line. Each one is progressively more exact. So when you're doing a scope of work, or I like to use line item estimating. And again, we go back to your scope of work and you start with that and you assign a cost to each line item. And the best way to estimate a project is based on a database that you've built from doing your projects. But when you're new or you just start doing this, that's not feasible. So some things that you can do is you can ask a contractor, you can talk to suppliers, you can talk to loan officers, because they see different projects all the time. There are published databases. One of them is called National Construction Estimator. You can get estimates from Home Advisor, and there's project management software that also has built-in budget information. So then you add in your labor requirements, and you always add a contingency based on the size and complexity of your project. Usually they run from 10 to 20%, but next you prepare a schedule. And the schedule helps you hold your contractor accountable, because if you don't have a schedule, you don't know what he's supposed to be doing when, he or she. And again, it starts with the scope of work. You go to each item on your scope of work and you kind of decide when each one should start and which one should end. and you put in task and milestone and overall durations. In construction, they usually use what's called a critical path schedule. And what that means is you're looking for the minimal time you can do a project, and you're looking at things that take the longest amount of time. And when you add those up, that gives you the smallest amount of time that you can do a project in. So the contractor's payment should always be tied to the schedule. That gives them incentive to finish a project on time. So here's your 9-step blueprint for hiring a contractor. Your first step is to create a pool of contractors. And you start looking for contractors as soon as you start looking for a project. You don't wait to find contractors. Here's some ideas on places you can find good contractors. You can ask other investors. You can ask lenders. You can ask architects, insurance agents, realtors. And a really good place is to ask other contractors. So the second step is to check qualifications. You want to make sure that you've researched the contractor and he's qualified to work on your type of project. Now, some things you can look, some places you can look to find out about the contractors. You can look at your state licensing agencies. You can look at the National Association of Remodeling Industry, Better Business Bureau, Credit Bureau, other investors. Anything you can do to find out information about the contractor. The third step is to conduct interviews with the contractor. And a few tips for interviewing the contractor is to conduct the interview like you would do a job interview and ask both situational questions and technical questions. And you make certain that the contractor has worked on the type of projects that you'll be doing. Has he worked on, if you're going to be doing kitchen renovations, has he done kitchen renovation? If you're going to be doing a full gut, has he done full guts? Or if you're working on a multifamily project, has he done that before? And because the multifamily projects are kind of like when I was working, I did a lot of dorm renovations. And so the trick there is that they have to be really good at sequencing the work. So you want to make certain that the contractor has worked on your type of project before. So here's some sample questions that you can ask. How long have you been in business? Are you licensed? Do you have a specialty? We just talked about types of projects, who handles the permitting process and inspections with the county. So the fourth step is to call references and do reference checks. And you always want to do reference checks. And sometimes you'll be really surprised at what references tell you. They'll tell you, I wouldn't work with that person again. And you wonder why they gave him as a reference, but you are sometimes surprised. So next, you compare the notes on the contractors, and you want to talk to you want to narrow it down to at least 6 contractors, 5 to 6, so that when you get ready to bid your project, you have at least 3 bids. You want to get 3 bids. So here's some sample contractor evaluation criteria. And they're so similar to the questions that you ask when you're interviewing the contractor. You want to learn about their background and learn about their experience. And you can ask them, can you run a credit check? Because a lot of smaller contractors have financial problems if they're not really good at running their business. So,
Sorry to interrupt. When you mean credit check, do you mean the LLC of that contractor or the personal credit check? Because sometimes smaller contractors may not have all the paperwork ready.
well, either or both. You want to find out what the financial position of the person that you're going to be dealing with, basically. So here's a sample contractor pre-qualification summary. So we talked about different categories that you wanted to find out things about the contractor background, experience. You want to score the interview that you gave them, previous projects they've worked on, and references. So you can, this doesn't have to be, I mean, you can do it on a piece of, just a plain piece of paper. You can do it on a spreadsheet. You can do it on a piece of graph paper. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. And the other thing that you want to do is that you want to come up with some sort of system. You can go one to 10 and give them a score. You can go 1 to 3. You can give them a score. You can do a plus, a minus, whatever works for you. But it's some way that you can just get a picture of who's the best contractor. So the next thing you do is prepare the bid documents. And this goes back to the scope of work that we talked about in the beginning. You complete any information that you didn't complete before. You decide on allowances and unit prices and alternates. So allowances are used for things that you can't estimate very well. Unit pricing is used for anything that you think you might have to have additional work for, like maybe, outlets. You want to get a unit price for putting those in. And alternates you can use for things that you would like to do in your project, but you aren't sure if you have the budget to do it. So things that might be in your bid package, or a site survey if you had it, have it, instructions to bidders telling them how to bid, contract terms and conditions, bid summary form, the scope of work that we talked about, your complete set of drawings and specifications if you have drawings, and a performance and payment bond if required in your state, and a disclosure form for workman's compensation coverage. So the next thing you do is you just invite the contractor's bid. And you hold a pre-bid meeting with the contractors, walk through your property, make sure to answer any questions that you have. And your next step is to receive the bids. And then after you receive the bids, you do a bid comparison and you look for and address any irregularities in the bids. So A bid comparison sheet would look like this. Again, you have your scope of work going down the side. There I have clearing, demo, foundation, frame and exterior doors. These are just made up numbers. But you look for irregularities, like right here, there are two contractors around the $2,500 mark. Well, one contractor at $4,500. So the question would be, why is that? And the same thing here, you have a contractor that's low, or maybe one contractor who doesn't give you a number on something. So all of those things need to be resolved. And then you award the job. You prepare a written contract, always have a written contract to protect your interests and the contractor interests. And you get all the documentation for the contractor before you sign the contract. So here are some things that you might include in a contract. And I will say, always have your attorney review your contract. You can have your attorney just do, your attorney doesn't have to review each contract, but you can have your attorney do you a template, a standard template that you use. So a couple of things you need to include are start and finish dates, a payment schedule, and it needs to be tied to completed and inspected work. So you only pay for completed work. A signed copy of the contractor's bid price, all bid documents, including the scope of work and any changes sent during the bidding period. And it should tell how you're going to do change orders, and it should talk about retainage. And retainage is you're allowed in most jurisdictions to hold back 10% of the completed work that you're paying on completed work until you close out the contract. So before signing, you need a W-9, you need a copy of the contractor's license, you need the contractor's insurance and the workman's compensation coverage, or a disclosure if they aren't required to have workman's compensation. You need the performance payment bonds if necessary, if required. So managing the project during construction. So managing the project during construction is about tracking and controlling. And so you have to track your budget, you have to track finished work, you have to track supplies, inspections, and cash flow. One thing you must do is address any delays promptly with your contractor, because it's very important that you stay on schedule. And if you're tracking your schedule and you see that a contractor should be 25% of the work should be done, and he's only at 22%, you might think, well, that's not a lot, but it's starting to show slippage. And so you need to address it immediately. So you should hold progress meetings with your contractor at least once a week, so you can discuss the work that was done the previous week, the upcoming work for the week, and you can evaluate the progress of the project and address any concerns. A sample agenda could be approval of last week's minutes, old business, new business, the schedule, change orders, and any paperwork that needs to be taken care of. So on your site visits, you should always take progress photos and do quality checks. And quality is another thing that you should always take up with your contractor right away. As soon as you see a problem, you need to address it with the contractor. So navigating change orders. They're the first step is to determine if the change order, who the change order belongs to, if it's really a change order that needs to be addressed. And how you do that is, again, you go back to what have we been talking about? The scope of work. So you can see why I put the scope of work at the beginning and why it's so important. It's the key. It's the key to managing a project. The type of change orders are for unforeseen conditions, design errors and omission. You can have a change order just because you requested it, you want to do something different, and design improvement. Now, unforeseen conditions are like if you're doing a renovation and you can't see what's behind the wall or what's in the ceiling until the walls are ripped out. So those are usually unforeseen conditions. And one renovation that I did, when we took the walls out, there was no framing around the windows. So, and then design errors and omission, that's something that's usually dealt with in the architect's contract. It's something that the architect forgot, or he missed something that was in the code, and it's an architect's error. So now I'm going to touch a little bit on women hiring contractors and a few things to consider. And so even the men here may have women that are partners. So in partners in their projects. So it's important for you to also be aware that there are biases in places where women aren't traditionally underrepresented, represented, and that you have to take proactive steps in order to address and overcome these biases to ensure fair treatment. So here's some tips for women and for the men who are working with them, is to pay extra attention to how contractors communicate and treat the woman when engaging for the first time. Say, do they talk to the woman or do they just talk to the man? It's the same thing as like when you take your car to the mechanic. So key points. Start looking for a contractor when you start looking for a project. You can increase your peace of mind and your ROA by hiring the right contractor. Plan your project scope, budget, and schedule before you hire a contractor. And by all means, don't let the contractor do that for you. Follow the 9-step blueprint to effectively hire a contractor.
Awesome, Billy. Thank you. Hey, I was like really, really interested because it's pertinent to me, as we discussed earlier. Is there any way you can send a copy of the like email a copy of the PowerPoint?
Oh, sure. Sure, I can.
Thank you. That was going to be my question.
I have a quick question, Billy.
Sure.
So as you said, the contractors will be paid based on the progress of the projects, right? That's what you want, like maybe 2-3 installments as the project progresses, right? Have you had it?
Go ahead.
Have you had any experience dealing with a let's say a contractor where he was supposed to get to a certain stage by this due date, but then he failed, so it was late. However, yet he insists upon getting paid first to get to the next stage and not working. How would you deal with it?
Not pay him, and if he insisted, find another contractor.
So just don't pay and try to find another contractor.
Yeah. So, I mean, yes. Well, he has a problem because he has to pay his subs and the people who've been working on the project. But he hasn't met his obligations. And so there's no guarantee that he's going to catch up. You know, that's just like once someone's late with the rent, they usually, you know, it seems to snowball. It's hard for them to catch up. So
Okay.
would
Mhm.
go ahead.
Would you wait till the actual, like, would you wait till until they actually late on a due date, or based on the progress, would you tell them before even getting to the point where it's late, the due date was met?
You tell them as soon as you see that there's slippage in the project.
Okay.
So you should be monitoring the schedule at least weekly. And it depends on how long the project is, how often you're, you know, monitoring the schedule. But as soon as you see slippage, even if it's 1%, you need to start talking to them and saying, you know, it looks like you're getting behind. How are you going to make this up? Because, and usually, projects have float built in, and there's usually a way to make it up unless it's on what they call the critical path. Those are the items that if one of those slips, your project's just going to be late. If he can show you how he is going to make it up, you could negotiate something with him. But, you know, you could negotiate a later date instead of just not paying at all. You can say, if you haven't made up, you can do an addendum to your contract. Say, if you haven't made up in 2 days or in 3 days, we'll pay you.
Okay. Thanks.
Awesome. Any other questions? Awesome, Billy. Well, congratulations. You made it with the cold and you survived and no coughing, and it sounds great. And we're all interested. So thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you. If you would
How do we reach out to you, Billy?
I can put I think I can. I'm gonna put my website in the chat. Except for I can't find the chat.
Nico, and also when we send out the recording, we could include her website as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll give that information and an email address as well.
Yeah, so my website is ellischrisproperties.com. You can see it down on the bottom of this. Well, actually, I probably have a slide with it on it. Okay, ellischrisproperties.com is the website. And you can also get their guide to the top 5 mistakes to avoid when hiring your next or first renovation contractor.
Oh, cool.
Mm.
Cool, cool. So you give a guide. That's awesome.
Okay, and I found the chat.
Great. Yeah, I'd love to read about that as well.
All right, great. So let's do this. Let's wrap it up. Go, you guys check out that website. We will, when we provide our email blast, we will give the website and maybe the PDF copy, or people can just go to the website and essentially get their own copy of basically this, right, Billy?
Well, the presentation is not on the website, but
The top 5 mistakes are, right?
right. Mhm.
Gotcha. Okay, great resources.
Great, great. Thank you everyone for joining tonight. We learned a lot of good tips from Billy today, and I'm can't wait to get the slide and just check it out again.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
Good
Thank you,
night.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Billy.
Bye.